Good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. And this is our monthly work session, and on tonight's agenda is masking, as we all are well aware of. And so I'm going to have city staff start off the discussion. I know there is a public appearance that we'll want to hear from Dan Speck, I believe, unless Nancy, are you? Oh, sorry, I hadn't looked at the screen yet. But I'm going to have Amy kick things off before we do that. Oh, and we should probably take roll call, yes. Al, if you'll kick that off for us.
Okay, and this is roll call for the work session. Benson.
Benson here.
Benson is present. Brunick.
Brunick here.
Brunick is present. Sarda.
Sarda here.
Sarda's present. Mybaum.
Mybaum's here.
Mybaum's present. Minor.
Minor's present.
Minor's present. Moser.
Mosier here.
Moser's present. Schramm.
Schramm here.
Schramm is present. Weber.
Weber is here.
Weber is present. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson here.
Mayor Johnson is present. City Manager Leon.
Leon is here.
City Manager Leon is present. City Attorney Denherter.
Denherter is here.
City Attorney Denherter is present.
So Amy or Ross, I don't know which one of you plans to kick things off first, but
Sure,
all of you
sure.
lead us.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to start it off, and then I will let Ross pick it up from there as well, and then let you get to your public appearances. So I want to just remind the public that's listening on YouTube that the purpose of the work session is a study session for the City Commission. It's an opportunity for the Commission to discuss together a topic, ask questions, call on experts, etc. They can take public input on items, and they may also choose not to. The reason they may choose not to is they don't take any action in this meeting. They can give direction to us as staff. They do not take action. So one of the things that we're monitoring is our YouTube comments. We're going to capture all the comments, and we're going to get them to all the city commissioners. So if you're making comments on YouTube and watching us right now, we will record those, and we will get those to the City Commission. Likewise, if you're sending emails to commission@cityofyankton.org, we have Colleen Bailey who's collecting those, as well as any emails that come into our personal emails, our staff emails, and we'll get those to the City Commission also. So there won't be any voting taking place tonight, direction given to staff. Later on tonight at 7 o'clock, we have a regular commission meeting. And on that commission meeting agenda, under a new business item number 11, is a resolution associated with some COVID-19 measures. Masking's included in that. Should the commission decide to make an amendment to that resolution this evening, they can do that by acting at that regular meeting. And at that point, public comment can be accepted. However, I would recommend to the commission, if they are going to make changes to that resolution, that we have some time as a staff to get that wording right and let the public know, so at a time of a special meeting or a future meeting, so the people can be prepared that that might be an opportunity for public comment. Because as it stands now, this resolution is already in place. It's been in place since April. So if you're not going to do anything with it tonight, my recommendation to the mayor would be to take that off the agenda entirely, and we would need action to take it off the agenda, but that would come at 7 o'clock. So just so the listening public is aware, if they're wondering why we're not responding to your comments, that's at this work session, that's why. We have the health board members also on the call here tonight on the work session, because I thought you may have some questions of us. And Dr. Mary Milroy, Nathan Johnson, and myself, Amy Leon, are on members of the health board. We also have ex officios, Commander Jason Foote, Ross Denherter, our city attorney, as well as Dave Mingo, our community development director, and Brad Bees may or may not be on tonight as well. So we have some folks there too. So with that, I would like, before you get to your public appearances, I'd like Ross just to run through his memo with the options as we understand them to be, and then we'll, at the mayor's discretion, let him hear from members of the public with items not on the agenda.
Thank you, City Manager Leon. Commissioners, I'd like to first walk you through this commission work session memo. It lays out a bit of history, where we were and where we've come until now. We did some extensive regulation last spring when all of this came about, and essentially a part of that was Resolution 20-26. In addition to the memorandum you have in front of you, I asked Colleen Bailey to attach that original cover memorandum and the resolution to the back of this commission memo, so you should all have a copy of that resolution as well as its explanatory memo that came with it. In essence, that resolution was essentially pitched. It was a recommendation by the health board and approved by the commission as kind of a stay-at-home order or shelter-in-place order. But that resolution was passed by the commission, and it has a broad panoply of CDC recommendations and kind of practical guidance that it recommends to the city and its residents and patrons that come to the city to shop. Essentially, all of it remains good guidance to this day. It's things like staying home if you don't have a good reason to be out, keeping your circle small. Don't take your children with you when you go shopping at the grocery store. It's practical social distancing guidelines, and among those is, of course, wear a face covering that covers your nose and your mouth when you're out in public, and maintaining appropriate social distancing. That particular resolution was not made into ordinance. It was just a directive to the community to follow to keep ourselves and our families as citizens safe. That particular resolution did not have a sunset time frame on it. So in essence, it remains the current directive from this commission to the public. If you wish, one of the options you have today will be to leave that resolution as it stands now, either with an educational component or not. Alternatively, the second part of this was the ordinances that this commission passed. First, we had Ordinance 1033. That was the ordinance that shut down businesses, and it had a sunset time frame on that. This commission voted by resolution to stop closing businesses or end the shutdown effective May 1st. That was the end of the business closure restrictions. However, that ordinance itself completely sunset on June 8th. So at that point in time, there was no longer any possible binding restrictions upon the public in any way regarding COVID-19. So in order to put the commission into a position that it could act quickly if there was a spike in COVID numbers that threatened to overrun our healthcare system, the City Commission had a first reading on Ordinance 1034. That was an ordinance that had a lot of powers that could be granted to the commission that the commission could then exercise by subsequent resolution. So that ordinance allowed for business closures. It also allowed for business restrictions, such as requiring patrons and staff to wear face coverings. But that was not passed into law. This commission had a first reading, or we typically refer to that as an introduction. This commission could pass that if we set an agenda item at a subsequent special or regular meeting with a second reading. Then we would need to do a publication of that ordinance in the Press and Decoded, and upon publication, that ordinance would become effective. Then this commission could have a subsequent meeting to pass a resolution in order to exercise any one or more of those powers. And I would also strongly recommend that any ordinance passage be preceded by a health board meeting with a recommendation. That's in keeping with the health police powers that are in our ordinance as it stands now. So in order to adopt even Ordinance 1034, there's a number of steps that we would need to go through. If we are going to do an ordinance other than 1034 as we see it today, we would need yet another meeting because we would have to do a new introduction and a second reading where it would be approved, plus a subsequent meeting to adopt a resolution to exercise any powers. So just keep that in mind as far as the guidance that you would give to staff today if you want to go the route of an ordinance versus a resolution. The steps involved with rolling out an ordinance are much more, it's more cumbersome, more steps, more preparation. The options that I've given for you guys to discuss this evening are not necessarily the only options available to you, but they seem like the most logical, and I'll take those from least restrictive to the most restrictive. So the first option I've laid out for you guys is you don't have to do anything. You could just do nothing at all. We can rest on the resolution as it stands now. It's a question of whether it's the public's place, whether it's the government's place or the city's place to slow the spread of the virus. There's places that have taken that approach. Another option that you guys have is to take no action on any new or revised resolution, but direct staff to remind and broadly educate the public and promote the terms of Resolution 20-26 to slow the spread of COVID-19. That would involve some sort of educational component, perhaps similar to what Mr. Specht has to propose to the commission tonight. And one thing that, looking back, I don't think we did a really effective, or at least I don't think we did an effective job of pushing the terms of Resolution 20-26 back in April. And now might be an opportunity to do that. If we educate the public that that's the official position of the city, maybe it'll have an effect. But that wouldn't require this commission to take any further action other than perhaps to allocate some funding for that educational component. And I think we'll all need to listen to Mr. Specht and his proposal for the commission in that regard. Another option we have is to pass a new resolution to supplement or replace or modify Resolution 20-26 to direct the public to take or not take certain actions to slow the spread of COVID-19, such as a mask mandate by resolution. This type of an action can be taken at any given meeting, perhaps even in the meeting, the regular session meeting later on this evening. Another option available to the commission involves simply passing Ordinance 1034 as written. As I indicated earlier, that would require one subsequent regular or special meeting to pass the ordinance. Then, in order to exercise the powers contained in the ordinance, the health board would need to meet, make a recommendation, and then the commission would need to adopt a resolution to take some action exercising any of those listed powers. And then, of course, option 5 is to just do a new ordinance entirely or to modify Ordinance 1034, which requires an additional meeting because we would have to do a new first reading or new introduction. Options 1, 2, and 3 involving dealing with the existing resolutions or passing a new resolution do not have the force of law. There's no penalty that can be imposed. On the other hand, if you pass Ordinance 1034, or if you pass a mandate ordinance that contains a penalty, there can potentially be a fine or perhaps jail time for violation of its provisions. You could also pass an ordinance that does not have an enforcement mechanism. As I indicated in my memo, that still has no force or effect of law. It ends up being effect-wise similar to a resolution, but ordinances are in fact the law. So, you know, in my speaking with commissioners earlier today, one of you pointed out that, you know, making something law gives it more gravitas, whether it has an enforcement mechanism or not. That's for you guys to decide. Just be aware of all of the steps involved to get through the process of turning an ordinance into law. The effort involved on the side of staff and the commission and the multiple meetings and things makes that quite a cumbersome process if the effect is the same as a resolution. So I just leave you with that, but my recommendation to guide your discussion or to kick this off is maybe start this from the hardest step to the easiest step, which is first discuss amongst yourselves whether the commission would like to see an enforcement mechanism, because that will guide the discussion. We'll know that if a plurality of this commission wants to see a potential fine or other penalty for refusal to cooperate, that will make it clear that we're going to be dealing with an ordinance. If not, we can maybe work our way back. But I think that's a good place to start this discussion. Is there stomach amongst this commission to have an enforcement mechanism?
Thank you, Ross. Before I have the commission embark on that discussion, I think it may be useful to go to public appearances. And Dan Speck, I know you wanted to address us tonight, and I would be remiss if I didn't recognize Nancy Winandy from the Yankton Area Chamber of Commerce and Yankton Area Progressive Growth in the audience tonight. Last week we had some pretty lengthy conversations about this masking issue, trying to find what we thought would be most productive to get the community through this difficult time. And frankly, we had differing viewpoints on it, but one thing we did agree on was that education was going to be very important no matter what the outcome of the commission's discussion. So Nancy really ran with that, and I think started talking with some of her peers and colleagues, and got us to where I think Dan is going to present us tonight in an educational campaign. So Dan, with that, I will let you take it from there.
Thank you, Mayor. So you're exactly right. Nancy and I, Casey Haberman and Ellie High Street have been talking the last few days with support of some local leadership about how we can use some of the talents we have to educate the community and motivate the community through a marketing campaign effort. What are some ways that we can influence the people around us to follow the CDC guidelines, keep our schools open, keep our businesses open, reduce hospitalization and infection rates? We all really know what to do. Sometimes we just need to be reminded to do that. So we put together a 3 to 4 month marketing campaign that will encourage people to follow CDC guidelines for very specific reasons that I've already mentioned: keeping schools open, keeping businesses open, and keeping people safe. The marketing campaign will need to be flexible and nimble as things change. Maybe different messaging might come out. We've had Mark Long from Mount Marty College and Dr. Wayne Kendall from the public schools agree to serve on the committee. It'll be a small committee. There will also be somebody from the city that Amy will provide that will keep that messaging moving forward. We'll use community influencers through radio, newsprint, and social media to get our messaging out. And we put together a $38,000 budget for this campaign. We're asking the commission to direct city staff to use about $15,000 of CARES Act money for this. We've got about $3,000 from the CVB that can be used towards this. And then the balance will come from the community. We've already had one strong leader within the community pledge $10,000 towards it. So we're a long way towards funding this effort. And again, the effort is just to remind people and educate people how serious this actually is. And if we do it right, we can keep things open. So I'd stand for any questions.
Dan, this is Commissioner Sarda. I've got a question on the educational part of it, right? So all the information has been out there for everybody to know and follow. Whether you believe in masks or not, that's not the point. But CDC has been publishing guidelines. It's been in the paper. It's been on social media. How will this be different than what's already been done?
That's a good question. Thank you, Commissioner Sarda. The tagline of the campaign is "Together We Can." And so it's not an effort to educate people to do the things they already know what they should be doing. It's an effort to educate them by together we can keep our schools open, but you have to do your part. Together we can keep our businesses open, but you have to follow the guidelines and do your part. And so the community influencers will be giving those messages online and through the newspaper and over the airwaves, hopefully motivating people. I'm a really good example. I'm the guy that gets out of my car to go into the store, and 75% of the time I have my mask, and 25% of the time I forget it. And so if I have that constant reminder, kind of like when I get in my car, my seat rings to remind me to snap my seatbelt. And if we can give constant reminders out in the community, I think that would be effective in helping people understand the importance of it.
Dan, this is Commissioner Mosier. I believe in conversations it was also mentioned working directly with businesses on some initiatives. Did I understand that wrong, or was that also part of what you're proposing?
No, thanks for bringing that up, Commissioner Mosier. So part of the actions will be through the chamber and kind of creating an online pledge from businesses and from residents. There'll be posters that can be put out. But yeah, you're right. The marketing of it will come through the chamber primarily, and then funneled through to the businesses asking for pledges for people to follow the guidelines.
Are there more commission questions for Dan?
This is Commissioner Sarno once more. So it will be, I think of businesses like stores and retail, but you're also talking about our manufacturing community and everybody that employs a large number of people, reaching out to their president or their corporate office or whatever it would be to get them motivated also.
Yeah, it'd really be any size business, from that small mom and pop shop to a large corporate business. We think it's important for everybody to be reminded and be motivated to do their best, to do their part in this effort. I was talking with somebody the other day, and they said, we're almost there. If we can get 6 months down the road, our country and our world should be so much further along. Vaccinations can help, and we can do the things. We can kind of see the end of the trail a little bit. And so we just need to continue to do what we've been doing and probably do it a little bit better.
Any more questions for Dan? Dan, thank you very much for that presentation. I do think that'll be a very important element going forward, no matter what happens. So I guess it'll be up to the commission as to whether we want to give $15,000 towards that campaign. That's something we would consider at a future meeting, but might be part of our discussion in the work session this evening. Is there anyone?
Thank you,
Yep,
thank you, Mayor. It's something that you can direct staff to do tonight. It doesn't have to be part of the future meeting, if I understand that correctly. And we'd really like to get going on it tomorrow morning, if possible.
Is there any discussion as to whether the commission would like to give direction to proceed with that tonight?
This is Commissioner Mosier. City Manager Leone, is this something that CARES Act money would qualify for? And how does that work if it is?
I believe it is, yes. However, we need to make sure we follow the proper procedure. So my understanding is we couldn't just give Dan $15,000, as much as he would maybe like that. But what we would do is partner with these entities that are funding, and we would pay for some of the direct components of up to $15,000. So say there was, $5,000 in radio ads and maybe $10,000 in print media or whatever the tools are, we would get directly billed for that for CARES Act response. We have not sent our CARES Act expenses through to the commission thus far. Those are funds allocated to us, and we've applied them accordingly. Some of the things that we plan to do, such as the Chronos time management, we sent through because we're not sure about that being reimbursed. And then the large expense I sent through to you to talk about in a public meeting because it was such a large amount of money. But we are directly requesting reimbursement for funding associated with coronavirus or COVID-19 response projects, some of which are similar amounts. So I don't feel we would need action, but if, at a future meeting, but if the commission wants to do that, they can. It would just slow that down further, if time is of the essence here, which could be.
So it's really a question of whether we give the staff direction tonight to proceed with pursuing CARES Act funding for this campaign. And I guess if for some reason that doesn't happen, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it.
Mayor Johnson, this is Commissioner Reiner. I have a quick question. If we were to do some kind of enforcement and have our enforcement be having businesses hand out masks before people were allowed to come into their buildings, would the CARES Act money help pay for the masks to provide those businesses?
I'm not sure exactly. However, we could probably buy masks and give them away. I don't know. I'd have to check into that, but I think so. One idea that we had for CARES Act funding was potentially purchasing masks for, our public buildings and maybe for, utility customers, distribution, all those things, questions we had. But possibly, yes, I would think, but with any CARES Act funding, it's only as, it's got to be approved. So there. I think so. We just have to go through the Office of Budget Finance to make sure we're doing it according to how they would see fit.
One thing I do know is that they're pretty strict on our ability to get funding for reimbursements to third parties, because the idea is, of course, that every third party could latch onto the city's CARES Act funding. And so we'd have to be very careful how we would structure such a thing, because the city can only pay directly, which is the reason for Mr. Speck's campaign, we would need to be billed directly. We couldn't reimburse those parties for their funding after the fact.
So for the commissioners, is that direction to proceed? Is there any opposition to that?
This is Commissioner Brunick. Do we know for sure that it'll be covered under the CARES Act?
No.
No, we don't know anything is for sure until we get the check. So things that we think are for sure are maybe not, and things that are sometimes not for sure are. So we don't know. I have a pretty strong indication it would be. I think that was Commissioner Brunick, because Spearfish is doing something very similar, and Spearfish has been reimbursed, and I just know that from talking to their city manager. So that gives me pretty good confidence that this would be reimbursed.
I would think that it would be, we all know where assumptions can get us. At times, I think it would be nice to know for sure that it would be, just to know for sure, with the caveat that we are in favor of it, but we want to know for sure that the CARES Act money is going to cover it. So if we could put it in and ask.
The most we could do is ask, and they'll sometimes give us an indication, but we don't know, we don't know for sure on any of the things that we put in.
This is Commissioner Mosier. Amy, so obviously CARES Act money makes sense to do something like this. How does it sit with the city budget? Should we put this through and you spend it? Would there be issues in our city budget, and whether it's Al or you, if that's not covered in the CARES Act, would we then spend out of the city budget?
Yeah, I mean, I think, because of some of the CARES Act reimbursement we've already had, we will have room in our budget to make that kind of an expenditure if it wouldn't be reimbursed, certainly. Or you could use triple B money, and we all know with triple B, that's something else you say no to. But yeah, we can make that kind of expenditure work if it wasn't reimbursable. But again, I think it is. But even if we ask them, they could give us a good they'll say, the most they'll say is, yeah, this looks like we have a good indication, but they'll never say for certain.
This is Commissioner Minor. I would just go on the record. I think the education campaign sounds like a fantastic idea. It's going to be a long winter. I don't think it's the solution to our immediate issues, but I think in conjunction with some discussion tonight about encouraging mask wearing immediately as well as over the winter, I think it could be very effective.
This is Commissioner Meiden. I think because I did see a good handful of nodding heads over the education component, but we are at about the halfway point here with the work study session. Going back to what Ross had opened up the meeting with, and hopefully maybe now might be a good time to offer up a little bit of certainty. So he given us the items 1 through 5 from which to choose. Would it be useful to help steer the conversation if we can provide him and city staff some consensus on which number we think we want to continue the conversation over? Because like I said, it feels like just by seeing some nodding heads, we're all in the same boat as far as the education component. But that being said, from my perspective, given Ross's breakdown of the options, I would, at this point in time, go with what he described as option number 2, and I'm just reading it here. So take no action on any new or revised resolution, but direct staff to remind and broadly educate the public and promote the terms of Resolution 20-26 to slow the spread of COVID-19.
Commission, take it away. Where do you, Tony's laid out where he's at. Where is everyone else at?
Commissioner Minor here. I think we have to have an ordinance. I would argue on behalf of an ordinance. I think we have to have some sort of mechanism in place. We don't have to lead with the hammer, but I think if we don't have enforcement, I've been teaching a long time. You're preaching to the choir with the education, but I know if I give an assignment to a student and I say you can do it or not, then if I don't have a consequence, then I'm in a pickle. That's what I'd say.
And I would just agree with Commissioner Minor. It seems like an ineffective way to deal with such a serious problem if we don't have some kind of a consequence tied to it. I'm speaking, as a leader, as a parent, as a family therapist. We've got to have a plan for how there would be consequences. Otherwise, it seems silly to waste our time.
This is Commissioner Mosier. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
This is Commissioner Sarno. The enforcing it is the tough part, right? I can't imagine how we would try to force it. So, Commissioner Minor, how would you, or even City Manager Leon, how would we enforce it? And would we have the police officers? Would people call the police? Would they call dispatch?
City Manager Leon, that was going to be my question too, is your thoughts, whether it's you or I know Chief Harris is here, what their vision is for what this looks like to the police department who would have to enforce an ordinance.
All right, I think you can hear me now. Is that right? Okay, sorry about that. And Chief, you're welcome to chime in here if you'd like, but enforcement is an issue. These communities that have had these in place in our area have not had a lot of luck with enforcement. Enforcement ranges from no enforcement, like we have a hammer, but we don't use it, to there is a hammer, and when something looks like a nail, we'll use it, but it hasn't been around long enough to use. We've had also the discussion that people are calling in to report, the offense, but there's not a good way to go about enforcing. So, in some cases, dispatches have been busy with calls in on, so-and-so isn't wearing a mask at this location. But it is early yet. I think enforcement would be difficult for our police department at best. I think that's who the impetus would fall upon to do. It's not just a matter of an officer noticing somebody not wearing a mask and approaching them. It's also dealing with all the folks calling in, and we would have, I don't know, our non-emergency number after 5 o'clock is dispatch. So that is something to think about when it comes to an enforcement. A question I would have if you go with the enforcement route is, how do you treat bars and restaurants? If you're modeling other ordinances, many of them say, if you're not actively eating or drinking, you should have a face covering on. So, what would be, how we're going to handle that would be a question too.
Chief Harris would like to.
Differing ideas about maybe what enforcement looks like. Sorry, this is Commissioner Minor again. I feel like enforcement starts with the business owner saying, the city has mandated that we do this, and so would you please wear a mask when you come in the store? And if somebody doesn't have a mask, If Dan Speck forgot his mask in his car and he's coming to the store, we have a mask available for him to put on. And I think the vast majority of people would cooperate with that. I don't think you have to go to a police option until you get to the people that we're talking about, that I don't think education is going to work with. And then if we take out the teeth of enforcement, then we have no way to deal with it.
I'm going to have Chief Harris contribute some thoughts here.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, one of the things that we've done this past week was to talk with the cities in South Dakota and some of them in Nebraska that have both kinds of mandates for their police department. And without a doubt, enforcement is something that puts the police department in a real pickle in many cases, because we spend a whole lot of time working to develop relationships in the community. And this is an event that there's two sides to, and when we have to go enforce those things, it actually makes us look like we are the Gestapo, and we want to avoid that at all costs. Now, the thing that we actually also look at is when the agencies that had put in a mandate, they have the non-emergency number that's called, but most of those agencies are larger than ours, and they have staffing 24 hours at the non-emergency number. Here, after hours, ours goes directly to dispatch. So it could seriously inundate our dispatchers as well. So we have some concerns over that as well. My concern is that we will do whatever you tell us to do as far as the law and ordinances are concerned, but we would like to make sure that we don't start off with a heavy hammer or try to drive the nail every time.
You bring up a good point, and it was one of the things I thought about is how quickly does this overwhelm the 911 system? Like, how many I worry about there's 5 people calling in because somebody's not wearing a mask, and this person's having a heart attack and needs to call an ambulance. And how many calls can we take and put in hold before that person that needs an ambulance for a heart attack gets past those people with a mask? Does that make sense? Like, how many calls can we handle without being overwhelmed?
We generally have 2 dispatchers, and what they would end up doing is putting a number of people on hold and then trying to sort through that. And then many times you can miss those things because you have such an overwhelming amount. Because we don't have an after-hours non-emergency number that doesn't go through dispatch. We just don't have the staffing or the size of an agency to do that. The other agencies that have that do have that staffing. One example is Kearney, Nebraska. The other is Omaha. I spoke with the chief from Kearney, and he said that they've had this thing in place and they've never issued a ticket yet. And Omaha hasn't either. So, you know, it really doesn't have a lot of impact.
Thank you, Chief. Any more questions for Chief Harris while he's at the podium?
I have a question for Chief Harris. Sorry, Commissioner Minor here. If we pass a resolution and say the city requires masks, but we don't put any teeth behind it, and then the business owner puts a sign up that says, I require masks, and then the person walks in without a mask, how does the business owner, if we don't get behind the business owner?
I can answer that real quickly for you, Commissioner. One of the things that we have in place right now with some businesses in town, they currently have mask requirements. They have called us, and what we will do is go there. The business owner has the right, no different than no shirt, no shoes, no service. You don't have a mask, they ask you to leave. If you don't leave, then it's a trespassing issue, and there is a teeth, and that is a high misdemeanor. So we can solve those problems for those businesses if they choose to. And it's no different than any other service problem that they might have.
Have we had an overwhelming number since people have started asking?
No,
customers?
We have not.
The issue with our dispatch center to date is that I think I couldn't contribute one thing over the other, whether it's mental health or, stress from the pandemic, but dispatch is up in call volume over 5% as it right now, just from a regular, and we think that's due to all the things we're experiencing and, in our own lives and people's abilities or inabilities to cope with them in a healthy way.
This is Commissioner Mosier. I guess to keep the conversation moving along, I am with Commissioner Maibaum in that I would support option 2. I feel that a mandate pits neighbors against neighbors, business owners against the precious customers that they so desperately need to get into their businesses to stay open, and puts undue pressure on business owners to, as they're trying to think about keeping their business open, now I have to worry about enforcing a mask and not allowing people into my business. It needs to be a personal choice. I strongly encourage education. I would be remiss, and along with all of us who suffer COVID fatigue, to say I had forgotten we had a resolution in place already. So thank you, Ross, for sending that out. I was like, oh yeah, we voted this back in April. That was like 5,000 years ago. And so we do have a resolution in place saying this. I think we need to get back at people, use a community-driven campaign, much like we did for Dive in Yankton and the school opt-out, where we're rallying citizens to empower and rally others to do what's right. We are so close to the finish line. The Calvary is coming. And what can we do to finish strong together to get our community across the finish line as a community with as many of our community members as we can? And so those are my 2 cents. I don't want to take up the entire mic time, but I really think a strong educational, remind people why it's important, get to their heartstrings, and how do we support our neighbors? How do we support our community? How do we support each other? And it starts with just explaining why. It always starts with why. And that's where I'm at.
This is Commissioner Benson. I would agree and echo Commissioner Maibaum and Commissioner Mosier's remarks. But I think I heard it used best today earlier by someone when they said, I'd much rather dangle the carrot than use the bat. And I think that that is a good way of looking at it. I think we need to rally the troops. We need to bring people together right now. So that's where I stand.
This is Commissioner Brunick. I'd like to express my point of view. I am not in favor of enforcement. However, I am in favor of an ordinance. I'm not in favor of continuing on and saying and going just along with what we've been doing. I think there needs to be a compromise here. I think that there needs to be a compromise in that there's not enforcement, but there is also not a green light to say that nothing is being done wrong by not wearing a mask. I don't think that that's appropriate. I feel that everyone talks about compromise all the time, but when it comes time to compromise, they don't necessarily want to compromise. I feel that this would be a good time to compromise, and I'm also approaching this from the point of view of the business sector. I have talked to a number of people in the business sector who employ people. Right now, our economy is being held up not by the people that are staying home, but is being held up by the people that are going to work. And those people going to work, it's reliant on them to be healthy enough to be able to go to work. And I see that the masking is a way that we can help keep our work population as healthy as they can possibly be, so they can continue to go to work. Because realistically, you can order items online and pick them up curbside, but you can pat yourself on the back for doing that because you've socially distanced yourself. But the hero in that transaction is all the people that got those products to the curb, whether it's the person working at the store or the person who packaged it, who delivered it, who shipped it. All of those people did that by being well enough to be able to go to work. I really think that there's an issue with work shortage. If you catch COVID, you're out for 10 days. If you have somebody in your household, you're out for 14 days. So I think we need to do whatever we can to protect the health of those who are going to work and keeping everything going.
This is Commissioner Weber, and I can appreciate all of the comments made up to this point. However, the reality is that we have to think about our healthcare workers, our first responders, our paramedics. We have to think about our vulnerable people in this community. We have got to think about how our healthcare system is being taxed by people who are sick in this town, people who are sick out of town being transferred into our hospital. I am a small business owner. I know how difficult this time is. We've got to think broader and about the people who are taking care of us and the people that we need to be healthy enough to take care of us. We can't be short-sighted about this.
We've got less than 10 minutes left. I believe there are 2 commissioners. We haven't heard their position yet. So I would invite you to share where you're at on this. Commissioner Sarda and Commissioner Schramm.
Sure, this is Commissioner Sarda. I like the resolution that we already have. That'd be the number 2. And I also agree with the educational part. The city helping to fund the educational part. And I know it's a touchy subject. It's in everybody's household, whether we should have a mandate or not. But you still can't stop people from gathering. You can't stop people from having Thanksgiving together, passing COVID around in their houses, bars and restaurants. Unless you close them, you can't police that, in my opinion. So I like what we already have, number 2, and go with the funding.
And this is Commissioner Schramm, and I also am in favor of number 2 with education and not making a enforced mandate. I think with the trespassing laws as we have them now in place, that can be a way to police certain things. If somebody is feeling very strong about having a mask in their establishment and people aren't listening. But I also think the word mandate just has such a visceral and emotional reaction for certain people that it's hard to look at that in a positive way. I'd like to see a positive approach that's not so antagonistic towards our population, to a large number of our population. And so everything everyone said, I think, is coming from a place of compassion and empathy. And there's various ways to do this. And I'd like to see the education piece go along with number 2, would be my preference.
All right, it sounds like we've got our direction here, but I just want to
say one thing?
Go ahead.
This is Commissioner Minor. I clearly am in the minority here. I just do not find it antagonistic at all to ask our citizens to step up. Our school, every student in our school, 5-year-olds are wearing masks to school all day long. I just do not think it is asking too much of our citizens to wear a mask into a store. And if they don't, to say, then you need to find a different store to shop in or whatever. It amazes me that our students are stepping up, and we will not set the bar higher for our adults.
I think, Commissioner Minor, I appreciate what you're saying. It's the unofficial Stephanie Mosier straw poll at Hy-Vee on Saturday. I mean, I do see when I go out, I would bet 90% of people at Hy-Vee on Saturday, if maybe not more. I think only caught 2 at 10 a.m. on a Saturday who did not have a mask on. I think people are doing the right things. I'm going to violate my own HIPAA. If you can't use yourself as an excuse, I had COVID. You know where I got it? I got it from home. It was brought into our home. I got it from a family member. So if we're not stretching and telling people they have to wear masks in their home, if they're not wearing them when they're out in the bars and the restaurants, when they're hanging out in groups of people, in their garage parties and in their get-togethers, we won't have stopped anything, because it's coming. I heard on the table, one of the news channels, that people are now, the biggest place of where they're getting it is their own dining room tables. And so that's where I struggle, is all those other off things that people are doing where that won't be mandated, and that's a hard part for me.
I would
And
think
just
that
in
I
response
would
to
like.
that, I did not know that you had COVID, and I hope that you're okay. But because we have that kind of gathering occurring, then it seems responsible to me that if you're going to a public place, not a bar, not a restaurant, where we expect you're not going to eat through your mask. We don't expect you to eat through your mask. But if you're going to Hy-Vee or to Walmart or to Rexall Drug or to Ace Hardware, wherever it is that you're going, we would expect you to wear a mask because you may have been exposed in another place.
This is Commissioner Brunica. I'd also like to state that it didn't start from your dining room table. It came from outside. It came from some other place. And to say that we're not going to have, or we shouldn't have mass because most people are getting it from their dining room table, I don't agree with that. I think that people are getting that from any way that we can reduce transmission, I think is something that we should be looking to try to encourage.
And sorry, I know we're running out of time. I didn't mean we didn't have to wear masks. I am not at all proponing. I am a big supporter of masks. I wear them out in public. I have one on tonight because it's a city rule. I can't give it or get it to anybody, but I still adhere to that because I think it's important for people to see community leaders supporting this. So I am 100% behind masks. It's one of 3 legs of a stool that the CDC is balancing on to combat this, which is also washing your hands and distancing when possible. And that's where I think the educational component is so huge to this. And to appeal to people's personal side of why it's important, I think is how we get to the end. It's not that I don't think people shouldn't wear masks at all. I don't know anybody sitting up here that thinks nobody should wear a mask and it's not working. I just think we have to appeal to people's personal sides and really illustrate now why it's important and how do we finish strong as a community.
I'm just going to, before we run out of time, add my thoughts on this. You know, in the last week, the South Dakota State Medical Association has said it would endorse mask ordinances, mandates, whatever you want to call them, in communities that were considering them. Avera Health has taken the same position. Yankton Medical Clinics Board took the same position. I saw the CMO, the Chief Medical Officer of Sanford Health, on TV this morning saying the same thing. And why are they saying that? It's because our state is being overrun by our state hospitals are being overrun by sick patients. And so I think that's what makes this different and more pressing, and why we need to really come together as communities to do all we can. And it is true, masking is only one part of the entire solution, but it is one that the CDC tells us is a powerful one if enough people do it. It's released 2 studies just in the last, or 2 reports just in the last week, talking about the efficacy of masking if a majority of the community does it. We've had more than 100 South Dakotans die in just the last 4 or 5 days. I mean, that is an incredible number. This is a natural disaster, and it is unlike any other natural disaster we've ever faced because it's gone on so long and it affects all of us, and it's invisible. And so that's why I think it's been hard to wrap our heads around it, but it is still it is still a natural disaster, a public health emergency. And so that's why I think it makes sense to me that we would strongly encourage people with an enforcement mechanism to wear masks, not because I want to tell people what to do, not because I want to have a power trip, but because it's a way we can support each other to get through this. Because there is light at the end of the tunnel, it's looking like, and we're very close. So if we can stop the or if we can slow the infection rate, because masks are not going to stop cases, it's just going to reduce the spread, to reduce the stress on our hospitals and then get to the vaccine, that's where I would love to see this go. But the majority of the commission seems that they want to take option number 2, which is we don't enact a new resolution. We don't enact an ordinance. We just stress the points in our current resolution, and we'll focus on the education campaign that's come before us tonight. So again, I thank Nancy and Dan, and I know Casey Haberman worked on that as well, Ellie High Street, for their work putting that together so quickly, because no matter what, that is an important component of this to help get us all on the same page and get us through to the other side of this pandemic. With that, it is 7 o'clock, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mosier.
Benson, second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
And this is roll call on the adjournment of the work session. Benson.
Benson, aye.
Benson's aye. Brunig.
Brunick, aye.
Brunig is aye. Sarda.
Start aye.
Sarda's aye. Mybom.
My bum is aye.
Mybom is aye. Minor.
Minor, aye.
Minor is aye. Mosier.
Mosier, aye.
Mosier's aye. Schramm.
Schramm, aye.
Schramm is aye. Weber.
Weber's aye.
Weber is aye. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson, aye.
Johnson is aye. Motion to adjourn the work session passes 9-0.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to adjourn for just a couple minutes, and then we'll be back for our regular session. And for, I guess, for the viewing audience, I anticipate we'll take off the item we have under, is it old or new business to discuss masking? We'll remove that from the agenda because we've kind of settled where that is at. So if you're interested in masking, the masking discussion is over for tonight. Thank you.
So you're not going to be doing any kind of voting or anything on it, or is that like just up to you guys, or people who show up to the meeting? Like, do you guys vote on just that for yourselves, or you don't ask for the people that come in?
So this was a work session, and so it's really focused on discussion between the commissioners. Unless we had a system that we had a project to consider. But without this being on our regular agenda, there's. So if you're interested in addressing the masking issue, what you could do is we have a public hearings section during our regular session coming up.
And that's the one at 7, correct? So the
I should clarify, there is currently